Okay, this is part 3 of answering Rosary objections. This article here. I'll continue on where I left off. Okay, the third unbiblical statement in the Hail Mary is the plea for us to pray for us sinners. Here we see the unbiblical practice of praying to Mary to intercede with God for us. Again, like I've stated over and over, if it's wrong for people in heaven to pray for us, then it's wrong for people on earth to pray for us. If one's an intercessor and the other is an intercessor, and you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. Catholics don't deny that Jesus is the only intercessor. Other people are intercessor in the sense of praying for us, but people on earth do that as well. So, through Jesus and Him alone, we have direct access to the Father. Christ alone mediates and intercedes between God and man, for there's one God and one mediator between God and man. Okay. Once again, I've talked about this in the previous videos. Prayer to anyone other than God alone is anti-biblical. Okay, let's talk about that. Pray is an outdated English term for what it's intended. Right now, currently, pray has a religious connotation. A lot of people associate it with worship. However, pray just means to ask for a favor or to beseech someone to listen to your plea. If you read the King James, pray is used in this way for human talking to human. For example, in Genesis, Abraham talking to Sarah, his wife, says, I pray to you, or I pray you to tell people that you're my sister. Obviously, he's not worshiping his wife. Pray just means to ask a favor, ask someone for a favor. So, okay, the article says prayer is an act of worship. Again, that's using an an old term. Prayer, now largely it's used in religious context, but that wasn't always the case. So to say that because Catholics pray to the saints, that they're worshiping the saints, is a bad argument. For example, even the word worship doesn't always mean worship in the sense of worshiping God. In the King James, when it says, do not sit in a high place, because someone might ask you to sit in a lower place, and in low places someone can raise you up to a higher place, because then you'll have worship in the sight of your brethren. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that they will worship you in the sense of worshiping God. It means to honor and respect. So even the word worship has changed in its meaning, just in the same way that prayer does. So to equate prayer with worship is not etymologically sound. So, okay, moving on. Directing our prayers to anyone other than God is robbing God of the glory that is His alone, something He says He will not tolerate. Again, asking, which is what prayer means, what originally means, asking someone for a favor, just like you can ask someone on earth to pray for you, is not robbing God of His glory. It's sharing in the communion of saints, which the Apostles' Creed very clearly says, which has been understood to mean that there's a union between the saints on earth and the saints in heaven, and that they pray for one another. Okay, and the last part here, he goes on to say, calling Mary the Queen of Heaven is idol worship, and it condemns it in Jeremiah, and a list of different references: Jeremiah 7:18, 44:15, and 44:18-19. Okay, this just shows that he's grasping at straws. In the Rosary, she's not even called the Queen of Heaven. So he's just trying to bash on Mary and Catholic understanding of it at this point. He's not really dealing with any argumentation. Uh, and what about calling Mary the Queen of Heaven? Uh, just because there's familiarity between the two does not mean that they're the same thing. Catholics don't worship Mary, which I've said before. They don't think that she is divine. Um, they condemned that in the early church when they considered Mary a goddess. If you look in the Quran, it condemns those who um, say that Mary is part of the Godhead. Well, why? Because in that time, when Muhammad was familiar with a heretical sect that taught that Mary was divine and part of the Godhead, which was condemned by the church. Um, but there was a group that did believe that, which the Quran references, and but again, the early church denounced that. So because there's familiarity doesn't mean that they're the same thing. Another example that is often used is in Jeremiah 10 when it says that they cut an idol out of the forest and they fastened it with nails that it moved not, and they deck it with silver and gold. Some people say that that's the Christmas tree. However, because of similarity does not mean that they're the same thing. The Christmas tree comes from German mythology and in German culture. The Christmas tree does not come from Ishtar. That's a historical leap of facts that uh, people are who are frightened to believe everything they read on the internet say that they equate the two. And again, calling Mary the Queen of Heaven doesn't mean that they're worshiping the same cult that people in Jeremiah were. For example, Baal means Lord, Yahweh means Lord or Adonai. Just because and there's some people today that say if you call God Lord, you're worshiping Baal because it's the same word. Again, that's equivocating. That's because of similarity does not mean that they're worshiping the same thing, or they're honoring the same thing, or it's the same practice. Mary is called the Queen of Heaven because she is the Queen Mother of Christ. That Christ loves her. That one of the last things He did on earth was to provide for her by giving her to John. Um, so I, again, he's just grasping at straws at this point. But this concludes the article. In my response to it, hopefully it has been a blessing. And God bless, and talk to you next time.